Boris Yeltsin was the president of Russia when the Soviet Empire began to show signs of weakening. He initiated several reforms in Russia, economic reforms, social reforms, and he got a strong pushback from the hardline communists. At one point, they even laid siege to the White House in Moscow. He and his family were inside, and there was an armed revolt that was shooting at the White House. They were sending death threats to him and his family, but he withstood it. And in the end, he came out victorious. A reporter interviewed him and asked him, what was the source of that courage and strength? How did you stay strong in what you knew was right, even when your family's life was in peril? And he said, well, I got my strength and my courage from the example of Lech Walesa. Lech Walesa was the Polish president. He was the leader of the Solidarity movement and responsible for the collapse of communism in his country. He had been imprisoned. His life and the life of his family had also been threatened, and in an interview, a reporter asked Lech Walesa that same question. How did you keep going? Why didn't you stop when it got really scary? And Lech Walesa said, I was inspired by the life and the work of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in the United States Civil Rights Movement. Now, Dr. King had also been imprisoned many times, also had his life and the life of his family threatened many times. They even tried to blow up his house. And he had been interviewed many times by reporters who always asked him the same question. How do you keep going? When everything seems to be lost, when it seems as though everything is coming to a horrible end, how do you keep on going? And Dr. King said that he always got his inspiration from the witness of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was, of course, a seamstress in 1950s Montgomery, Alabama. A time and place in our history where black people were not counted as much and black women were counted as even less. So in this place and time, you have a person who was not even seen as a person. And she played a concrete role in the collapse of the communist empire. It's amazing what God can do with one simple act of faith. Rosa Parks had no idea that what she was doing would ultimately lead to the collapse of that empire. But she did it as an act of faith, and then God did the rest. Some things that we know and don't know about the rich man in the parable. One, it's a parable that Jesus made up for the Pharisees. We know the poor man's name was Lazarus. We don't know the rich man. Jesus didn't give him a name. The honor of a name went to Lazarus. We don't know why Lazarus was where he was or why the rich man was where he was. We don't know that he was dishonest. We don't know if he was evil. We don't know if he came into his wealth in really bad ways. We don't know about Lazarus. We don't know what happened that put him at that gate begging and having dogs lick his sores. All we know is that the rich man knew Lazarus. And we know that because he calls Lazarus by name when he says, Father Abraham, send Lazarus, who is the servant. Send Lazarus to dip his finger in water to cool my tongue, or at least send Lazarus to my Father's house. He knew Lazarus. The rich man was not punished and in torment because he had a life of wealth on this earth. I know that's what the text says, but that's not what Jesus means. He doesn't mean that if we enjoy life here, we will suffer in the netherworld. What the rich man is being punished for is not being rich. The rich man is punished for being complacent. That he passed Lazarus every day, saw Lazarus every day. He may very well have been moved to sympathy for Lazarus. And we talked a couple of weeks ago about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is moving to make it better. He may very well have felt sorry, but he never did anything to help poor Lazarus. There are a lot of reasons why people become complacent. I think the most common is the idea that I am just one person. Nothing I do or say is really going to make that big of a difference anyway. We forget that God doesn't demand that we be effective. He demands that we strive for fidelity. God did not demand of Rosa Parks that she play a part in the collapse of the communist empire, but he wanted her to be faithful, and she responded in faith, she responded in courage, and then God was effective. We don't have to be, God is. We do small acts of faith, and then God will take it, and God will be effective. We don't have to change the world. We just have to strive for fidelity and believe that God is effective. We are complacent so often because we think it just doesn't matter. We think that we just will never make that big a difference anyway. And so we don't vote because our vote doesn't count. That's not the point. The point is to be faithful. The point is to be a part of a change that God is working, to be a part of the effectiveness of God. We all want to change the world. And I think if given an opportunity, if given the power, given the wealth, I think most of us would do something really good. We want to be the major players in the change of the world. But that's not for everyone. And God does not demand it of anyone. All God wants us to do are those small acts of faith, to keep on striving for fidelity. And if we are faithful, God will be effective. It is our faith. And we are so often moved to complacency because we think that we don't matter. Nobody's going to miss my tithe if I don't put it in this weekend. That may or may not be true, but strive for fidelity. No one is going to miss my vote. That may be true, but strive for fidelity. Nothing I do or say in any situation is ever going to change a person, change a mind, but strive for fidelity. When we strive and are faithful in small ways, then God is effective in ways that we can't even imagine. God does not demand that we be effective in what we do. God does not demand that we stand up and change the world. God does not demand of us something that we simply cannot do. What God wants are those small acts of fidelity and for us to keep on striving. We may not get it right every time, but we will always strive to get it right. We will strive to be more courageous, strive to be more faithful, strive to be stronger, strive to be more loving, strive to be more generous. We keep on striving for something better. And when we do that, then God is the one that affects the change. Give God those small acts of faith. And don't worry if you're effective or not. Strive to be faithful and let God be effective.